I'm talking to you though. You're the stats guy.
Yeah, we're responding to
You're the stats guy, and we're the homies.
Hi, Silo. You're just in time to be recorded.
What's up, homies? It is time for another installment of Stats Homies. And this week, we will be covering not March Chaos. I believe that the other term is copyrighted, and this is a bit of a misleading whiteboard. Let's fix that. There we go. We're not doing March. Instead, this week we will once again be talking about the NFL. The reason has absolutely nothing to do with copyright. It has to do with the fact that I make all of the data sets from scratch, and so far I only have a good set of NFL data sets. That is because the NFL only plays 17 games and there's 32 teams. So, yeah, a lot less data to enter. If I wanted to do college basketball, I would, even if I just chose the 64 that are currently in the tournament, that would be twice as much data entry, and I am a single person. The homies are only here for their additional commentary. So, yeah, Greg, start entering data, buddy, if you want to cover topical subjects. So, first, let's look at overall team data. So, we're talking about win percentage here. We're talking about all pro count, the total count of your all pro players from the previous season. The reason I didn't do all pro counts from this season is because it could be somewhat biased based on who wins. I think that there is some of that. So what I'm looking for is an established all pro player that is playing on a team, basically. When you do win percentage predicted by all pro players, what you find is about a mean result of 0.39 or 3.9 percentage points. That's in terms of win percentage. So we will ask the homies what they think about that.
It works out to about every 2 all-pro players, that is worth a win, a single win. And it actually explained 18% of the variance of wins. So a pretty good portion of the story of winning was explained by all-pro players, which is interesting. So
is all pro the cream of the crop, the best players in the league get all pro?
yes.
Okay. So then that makes sense that if you have more all pro players on your team, you will likely win more because they are in their prime and performing well. That makes sense.
Absolutely obvious take from Nikki. The fun thing is that 2 of them only equals a win. So would you expect them to be worth more?
No.
Oh, really? No.
Okay. It's a team sport.
Okay.
My guy.
Fair enough.
To take this a step further, we can look at your offensive all-pro players and your defensive all-pro players and see which of them moves the needle. So if you've watched our offensive versus defensive yards gained video, this will not surprise you. But offensive players who are all-pro significantly predict winning, and defensive players do not. Although it gets even more interesting when you look at home versus away. So we will talk about that in a minute.
Okay. So another layer to this is when you separated offense and defense, all pro offensive players, the total count does predict winning. Defensive does not, which goes back to our offensive yards, defensive yards thing, where offense is just way more predictive of winning. So how do we think about that?
I just want to add in the caveat, if anyone was wondering, All Pro is established by a panel of 50 broadcasters and journalists throughout the year. So it's not fans voting and it's not league executives. And it's not players either, because there's bias with the NFL 100, stuff like that.
So you could, according to this, theoretically, you could have 11 all-pro defensive players. And if you don't have any on offense, that doesn't mean more wins. No, obviously.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Obviously, maybe not, because if you have 11 all pros on defense, your salary cap is going to be through the roof, so you might not be able to afford an offense.
True, though. But that's actually a great point. And that's probably part of the story here.
I'd have to think all pro defense means that like those guys are getting paid, but there's like a ton of like you mean all pro receiver, but like you're still not like commanding that much. Like obviously all pro quarterback, like that's commanding a ton of your cap. But like other than that on offense, like offensive line, running back, especially nowadays, and then even receiver, like is not paid the same as I feel like the premier positions on defense. So then when you break out a roster, like I feel like an all pro on offense is more significant than like those couple of guys on defense.
Yeah.
How many all pros do the Cardinals have?
One.
Who was it?
Is it big?
James Conner.
Um, the, that would that might be
Oh,
true. That might be true for this season, but for last season it was zeros across the board.
yeah, I was thinking about this season. I don't know, last season.
Okay, so now looking at individual games and the home and away numbers. When you're home, each All Pro player you have is worth about 1.3 points, and that explains about 2.4% of point differential. And when you're away, it's higher, 1.6 points, and it explains 3.6% of point differential. So, an interesting trend here, but not very surprising when you think about leaders and really good players being more important on the road.
Now this was kind of interesting to me. At home, all pro players were worth about 1.3 points each. I didn't stratify by offense defense. So all pro players worth about a point and a half each home game. Away, they were worth 1.6 points. So a little bit more home away. And I was thinking, and it was way more significant in the away model. So I was thinking like home, everyone kind of plays better. You get kind of more of a team effort. Away, hostile environment, probably relying on your really skilled guys a little bit more, your veterans.
Okay, so now looking at individual games and the home and away numbers. When you're home, each All Pro player you have is worth about 1.3 points, and that explains about 2.4% of point differential. And when you're away, it's higher, 1.6 points, and it explains 3.6% of point differential. So, an interesting trend here, but not very surprising when you think about leaders and really good players being more important on the road.